Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Lunch Dialogues from Entrepreneurship to Public Service, organized by NUS Alumni Relations and the National University of Singapore Society. Today's session will begin with a sharing by the speaker, followed by a 30-minute Q&A. We invite you to participate by sending in your questions on the chat function of this Zoom meeting or by using the raise hand function in the Participants tab to indicate that you would like to ask a question. After the moderator calls on you, feel free to unmute your audio to ask your question directly. This afternoon, we are honored to have Mr. Edward Chia, Arts and Social Sciences Class of 2009, Member of Parliament for Holland Bukit Timah GRC, and the co-founder and Managing Director of Timber Group. With him this afternoon is our moderator, Mr. So Ita, Arts and Social Sciences and USP Class of 2014. I shall now pass the time over to Mr. Chia to begin his sharing. Mr. Chia, please.
Thank you very much, Althea. Thank you so much, everyone, for having me. Thank you very much to NUS Alumni Office. Usually for such sessions, I prefer just to do a quick introduction of myself and what I do, and I actually would love to have more engagements with Q&A. So please feel free to ask me any questions through the chat function, or I think you could raise hand later. And I think really rely on Ita to facilitate these sessions as well. First of all, thank you very much, Ita, for moderating this session. Okay, I am the co-founder and managing director of the Timber Group. Timber Group was actually founded in 2005, about 15 years ago. I co-founded the Timber Group when I was actually, I wouldn't say an undergraduate student, because I recall our first day of operation was in June 2005 and subsequently matriculated in US in August 2005. Suffice to say that I wasn't the best of students. To be totally candid, I very much skipped most of my lectures, attended tutorials, because back then tutorials, I'm not sure whether now attendance is still taken at tutorials. So I felt more like a part-time student and a full-time entrepreneur. And the first 4 years were challenging because I often shuttled between school and the business and the venue. So, but back to Timber Group, we actually were founded with a social mission of developing Singapore musicians. And we very much felt that, for me, fundamentally, as when I was 2005, I've always felt that every enterprise must serve a social purpose. So this was way before the notion of social enterprise was coined. But I believe that every business must serve a social purpose and must be a value add to society. So our founding purpose and mission was to develop Singapore musicians. Back then, we felt that there were many local musicians who were very talented, but they lacked a platform, and importantly, lacked a sustainable platform. So we started an F&B venue called Timber at the substation. That was our first venue. And over the years, we've expanded into various venues. We have also gone into festival organizing. We have actually ran international festivals featuring Grammy Award-winning acts like John Legend, Bob Dylan, Paul Simon, and Robert Plant. And recently in 2016, 4 years ago, we actually pivoted. We felt that we wanted to expand our social mandate and opened a multi-concept called Timber Plus at One North. And we then expanded our social mission to also develop Singapore culinary talents. So at the very core, it was always about developing local talent. But being an SME, we needed to be very focused. We started with music talent, and now we have expanded to also support our local hawkerpreneurs, chef owners. I think we could roll some slides to see some of the pictures of our venues. So I think, yeah. I think we can take the next slide, please. Yeah. So before we show you the slides, I mentioned about us being a home for Singapore musicians. That's our first mission. Second, as well, I can roll that slides. We also believe in being an inclusive workplace for all. This is something that we actually don't really shout about it, because to us, doing good we don't need to shout. I think it's just it's our social responsibility to do so. But we have been working with SCORE since 2012 to actively hire ex-offenders. This is a program that I truly believe in, that we as a society, we do need to give second chances to fellow Singaporeans. And the interview process is actually quite interesting. Before the inmates are actually released from prisons, they actually choose who they actually want to work for. And if Timber is shortlisted, my hiring manager, HR, will then actually make a trip down to Changi prisons and actually interview them. while they're still serving time. So most of the SCORE beneficiaries actually get offered a job even before they're discharged from serving time. To date, we have quite a few. Most of them actually work in our kitchen. They're very talented. I think they make full use of their time in prisons to actually pick up new skills. We also work with SPD, serving persons with disability, to also offer them new job opportunities at Timber. A few years ago, we also worked with National Kidney Foundation to also offer jobs to the NKF beneficiaries as well. So first, we believe in an inclusive workplace for all. One of the things that we are also known for at Timber Plus is that we actually invented a tray return system. We actually filed a patent and we eventually got the patent. The key intent is actually to encourage Singaporeans to actually eat on their tray and return their tray after their meal to a tray return point. We analyzed the issues before we started Timber Plus, and we then created an RFID tray return system. So how it works is every tray has an RFID chip. When you purchase a food from one of our food partners, you'll be charged a $1 deposit. And after a meal, you could actually return the tray to our tray return area, which is actually integrated with the dishwashing area. And then the coin return machine just returns you a $1 coin. So we actually borrowed the supermarket trolley concept and incorporated it into a food park. To date, we have 98% of tray return rate, and more and more hawker centers are actually replicating a similar system. If you ask me personally, my dream is one day we don't even need to have this dollar deposit system. It becomes very natural for Singaporeans to eat on their trays and return their trays. So but the $1 system is just to create a behavioral change. So we believe in technology adoption. We believe is also in also engineering social change, and we call it engineering social change one tray at a time. Next, please. As mentioned, since we started Timber Plus, we've also expanded our mandate to support our hawkerpreneurs. In 2016, we opened Timber Plus, and in 2017, we were given an opportunity by National Environment Agency to run one of their new hawker centers up north at Yishun Park. So it's called Yishun Park Hawker Center. When we looked at the hawker industries, we were very concerned. The average age of our hawkers today is probably already about 60, 61 years old, many of whom will be retiring, and they have no successors. So we felt it was important to actually encourage and incubate the next generation of hawkerpreneurs. And we created our own in-house incubation program. And in such programs, we actually sponsor all the startup equipment, and we subsidize rental, we subsidize the service charge as long as 6 months to about 12 months to give a runway and a lift-off for many of our young hawkerpreneurs as well. So at Yishun Park Hawker Center, I think our average age of hawkers there are about 38 years old. Most of our incubation have actually graduated from incubation program and subsequently signed on to be a full-fledged tenant. So this is something that we truly believe in, and we put our own resources into this to incubate the next generation of hawkerpreneurs, incubate the next generation of Singapore culinary talents as well. We firmly believe in environmental sustainability, and again, using technology to leverage on technology to specifically look at food waste. One of the new projects that we're looking at, currently at Timber Plus and Yishun Park Hawker Center, we have on-site food waste digester, but we also work with NEA on consolidating and having the food waste transported to a larger facility that will convert food waste into electricity, biogas, and then electricity. Moving forward, we're actually looking at a higher yield by using pneumatic pipe systems to actually collect the food waste, as much food waste as possible, and then digest on-site and converting that to electricity so that we could recycle this electricity for the food park. Right? So this is upcoming. This is something that we are doing currently, and the next Timber Plus that we'll probably be opening sometime next year, we're hoping to push the envelope and convert more food waste into usable energy for our food partners. Next slide, please. Thank you. So these are some of our brands. This is our very first venue that we opened in 2005, Timber X at the substation at Armenian Street. Next, please. And then this was our second venue that we opened at the Arts House, the Old Parliament House. It's actually a national monument along the Singapore River. Next, please. And I believe in 2011, we were then very interested in the Mandarin music segment, and we created a bilingual live music concept called Switch. We call it Switch because the musicians actually switch from English to Mandarin songs throughout their whole set. And they're effectively bilingual, and they banter with our audience with both languages. Thank you. Next. And Timber Plus was probably one of our most pivotal change in Timber Group's history, where we then expanded into a multi-concept. From a business model point of view, we created new revenue streams because previously we only had F&B as our main revenue. When we created a food park like this, we then had rental revenue as a new revenue stream for us, making us a bit more diverse and a bit more sustainable and more viable. Next, please. And this is the public hawker center that we are running on behalf of NEA up north at Yishun Park. If you look at the bottom right corner, it is also something that we are introducing in hawker centers. Most of the time when you go to a hawker center, it's really fulfilling basic needs to go there for affordable meal. But what we did is that we actually increased in programming. Every weekend we have this program called Park and Play, and parents can actually bring their kids to a hawker center, and there'll be free arts and craft lessons or arts and craft activities for young families. But because of COVID right now, we have suspended these activities, but the picture actually shows what we do on a weekly basis on the weekend. So we are also actually enhancing the overall experience of a usual hawker center. Thank you. Next one. 5 and 2, it's a social enterprise, more social enterprise focused bistro. We started at Punggol Park. This is where we actually make a more concerted effort to hire beneficiaries beyond SCORE. So we have hired folks from SPD. We have hired folks from beneficiaries from National Kidney Foundation as well. And the second mission is actually to feed underprivileged or resource-low families. So we actually, through VWOs, invite families for a free meal. Most of our resource-low families actually don't have the resources to actually go out for a meal at a restaurant, and we actually provide them or invite them for a free meal at 5 and 2. Next, please. We collaborated with Asia Pacific Breweries to open a Tiger Street Lab at Jewel. This is very in line with our mission of supporting our Singapore street food or Singapore hawkerpreneurs. On rotation basis, between 3 to 6 months, we actually feature different street food hawkerpreneurs at this location. So most of them would not have the resources to actually open up a full-fledged outlet at Jewel. So what we do is we actually feature them more like from a startup point of view, more like an accelerator program, where every 6 months we rotate different Singapore street food hawkerpreneurs there. So the bottom left corner is this second generation prawn zi cha hawkerpreneur by name Seth. He actually has a prawn mee store along Killiney Road, and he came for about 4 months at Tiger Street Lab, and we featured his dish. And I think the bottom right hand corner, one of his famous dishes is actually prawn white bee hoon, seafood white bee hoon. Yeah. So next, please. Buttressing our mission of actually supporting musicians, we also actually manage them, manage their commercial gigs as well. So for commercial engagements, wedding engagements, we help to manage them and provide them additional income opportunities. Next. Yeah. We also ran a music school. So the other way we actually expand career pathways for our musicians is not only do they perform, but they actually teach. And at times we actually feature our students back at the venue. The bottom left-hand corner actually is we actually run dance classes. And dance and music actually sometimes really goes hand in hand. And we at times have a live band performing while a dance class happens at Timber at the substation. Yeah. Thank you. Next. We used to run the beer festivals. We don't do that anymore. We have since sold a majority stake to SPH. So that was just a quick, brief overview of what Timber does and what really drives us. Personally, for me, the journey of entrepreneurship actually did not start at Timber. It was actually prior to Timber when I was in junior college. I really just wanted to do something for society. And together with other junior college friends, started a non-profit organization called Arts for Us All. And that was how I got to know my current business partner. And I will often share that I'm an accidental entrepreneur. I never intended to start a business, but I was always keen on starting a non-profit to push social causes. But having run a non-profit for 3 years throughout my national service, I felt it was difficult to scale. It was difficult to actually provide musicians more opportunities. And being naive at 21 years old, I thought, hey, it's not too bad. Open a restaurant, have the F&B revenue to sustain the musicians, create a platform. That was a fabulous idea. And I would say naive is because when I was running non-profit, I had very little manpower overheads because most of our team were volunteers. And then suddenly, starting out timber, we started having to pay salaries. And it was a very different ballgame altogether. And coupled the fact that I had to complete my undergraduate studies at NUS too. So that's just a quick, brief intro of who we are and what I've done over the last 15 years. Maybe Ita, over to you.
So on the point that you just made, perhaps you might want to share with us how you actually juggle your time between being a full-time university student or part-time, maybe you want to call it part-time, or running your own business and also championing the arts like what you have mentioned.
I think I'm tremendously blessed with a good team. Firstly, no entrepreneur can run a business alone. I really give credit to a great team. Even from day one, we have very good committed team. In fact, Timber's employee number one is still with Timber today. And I've seen her grow. And many of our colleagues have grown. I've seen them when they were single, dating their boyfriends, attended their wedding. And some of them now also have children of their own. So firstly, it's about a team effort. We very much regard our colleagues as family members as well. I often address them as part of the Timber family. So that's the first point. I think I'm very blessed to have a good team. Second, credit to NUS. I think the NUS system allows me to juggle my time quite well. And I still think it's a miracle that I graduated from NUS. It was definitely not easy. And really, some of my lecturers and tutors were aware of what I was doing outside school, and they were very understanding. So that's the two things. But in terms of sacrifices, there were a lot. I had probably no campus life. I had very little friends in school, to be frank, because I never had the time to socialize in school. And certainly no personal time at all. So I was always looking forward to the summer break because at least I had 3 months that I could just 100% focus on the business and not worry. I remembered actually my first year at NUS, it was quite bad in terms of time management to the point where I wasn't even aware there was a common test, and I conveniently did not even attend for it. I obviously got 0 for that part. Yeah, so it took me a while to kind of.
Yeah, so today's webinar is actually the title of today's webinar is actually from entrepreneurship to public service. So maybe you covered quite a fair bit of ground on how you started Timber and the journey thus far. Maybe you want to give more color on how you became a member of parliament and what prompted you to to serve.
Great question. Thank you so much. As I have shared, for me, my personal motivation has always been to pursue social causes, to play my part as a Singaporean. So since 18, it was always about, for me, the starting part was to actually create a platform for our young artists. Then when Timber started, it was about creating a platform to develop our Singapore musicians and subsequently culinary talents. So when I was asked to consider whether I would like to run for office or be a member of parliament, I felt it was a natural extension to what I've always been doing, which is really to be a value add to society, play my part to develop Singaporean talents. I truly believe that Singapore's greatest resource is our people, and I think that's often said. But beyond narrative, we do need to have actionable outcomes. We do need to take action into creating platforms, programs to actually maximize and harness talents that Singaporeans have. So at a personal level, it's an extension, it's an expansion. What I could do at Timber is limited very much by our resources because we are SME. Being a member of parliament just gives a new platform to continue to serve Singaporeans in a very, very different way. So to me, it's a natural extension. When it comes to politics, obviously there's a bit of difference between just being a social activist or being in a social space. One of my key motivations in politics today is that when I looked around the world, one thing that really concerns me is the increasing polarization of views and increasing polarization of society. And I hope to play my part to actually continue to defend or at least foster a broad middle ground and to create narratives where we could say that we can agree to disagree with each other, but ultimately we must respect each other's views and protect this broad middle ground. Because if one day we end up becoming a very highly polarized society, I think that it's not going to be, that will be detrimental for our children of Singapore. Yeah.
Yep. Edward, so we both read political science in NUS. So we know that no political system in the world is perfect. So what are some areas of improvement you say you hope to see in Singapore's system?
I think the quality of debate in Parliament is absolutely crucial. There are things that certainly we politicians will say in the campaign. In the campaign, we tend to be a lot bit more generic because it's about presenting what the issues that we are passionate about. But when it comes to Parliament, I think if we are elected to Parliament, we have to take that position with great responsibility and care. And that means being very prepared in Parliament to speak up, do proper research, and be very constructive. So to me, the main challenge or the main priority for me in Parliament is that we must critically examine government policies, but it's also important to be constructive in the process because it's still very much a co-creation process. So it's about the quality of debate, it's about scrutinizing policies, but more importantly, to be constructive in the process so that collectively we can create better policies that serve Singaporeans.
Perhaps you want to open the floor to the rest of the audience. I think we have got more than 80 of our fellow alumni in the house. So if you'd like to ask any questions, please raise your hand. And I see there's one question coming from Stephen.
Hi, Edward.
Hi, Stefan.
So, my name is Stefan, and like yourself, I'm an alumni of NUS. Currently doing my PhD at Queensland University of Technology, back for the pandemic. So one of the things that I recall you mentioning during your campaign is that you look forward to being a champion of mental health and well-being. And I'm curious to hear a little bit more about what you have in mind in terms of mental health and well-being for managing things, stresses in everyday life, for example, and the role of design for well-being.
Thanks, Stefan, and you're exactly right. I did mention during my campaign that this would be one of the causes that I'm passionate about and I hope to make a difference. A key part of mental well-being is, I think we do need to prioritize it on a higher priority at a national level. Same way that I think one year where PM says that this is the year that we're going to have a battle against diabetes and make it a national agenda. Because if it's not in the national agenda, it is always going to be a subtext, or it's always going to be something that is good to have or we do by the way. So first, I think we have to call upon as a national level kind of attention, and that's one. At the community level, what I'm trying to do at Zhenghua right now is actually closing the gap between those who are actually seeking help and counselors. When I speak to many of the counselors, they're actually inundated. They have so many cases they can't follow up. And much like how we have all learned how to do physical first aid, physical CPR, I think a core skill that is lacking within the community is mental first aid. So I've been speaking to my grassroots leaders and says, hey, can we take this time for all of us to go for mental first aid training so that we can, as grassroots leaders, we can play our community role to assist residents or residents in our community who may be going through a tough time. Right? So there has to be certain skill sets, training. Beyond the talk of, there has been a lot of narrative about inclusivity, destigmatizing mental health. I think that's important. But actually, if you look at it from a core skills, I think it's important to introduce such skills within the community. Now, it's actually two parts. First, when we go through such training, individuals then become more self-aware of their own mental wellness. Right. So first is self-care, having more personal understanding, and then the next part is then having the ability to care for others. Through this, I believe that stigmatization of mental wellness will also slowly go away, because often stigmatization is because of a lack of understanding of a particular issue. So I tend to be a bit more pragmatic because I'm an entrepreneur. I can always say, as an entrepreneur, if we don't take action, we won't have enough revenue, we can't make payroll, right? Customers don't come and part their money by us just talking about business. We have to make an action. So I believe in destigmatizing, but the way I'll go about it is then says, okay, then can we start one step at a time, engage our community, have more people being exposed and trained in this area, so that at the individual level, they start understanding that mental wellness, like physical health, is something that you have to have self-care and have an understanding of it first. And then, like CPR, you then learn how to actually be a mental first aid responder to someone who comes out and says, I'm having a bad day, or worse, I'd like to take my life today. Most of us don't know what to say or don't know what to react. So that's something that actionable that we are doing at Zhenghao right now. In fact, we are working with the 3 social welfare organizations in our community, Taiwan Guan, Fei Yue, and New Life, all of whom have in-house counselors, and we want to work with the counselors. So that's what we are doing at the local community level. At the national level, I will be starting to ask parliamentary questions on mental health to specific ministries. So for example, for MOE, I'll probably be asking, how many counselors do we have now in schools? What is the time lag taken if a student wants to seek a session with a counselor? What is the time lag? What is the counselors to student population ratio? What are we doing to help students in terms of peer support training, so that peer support students can actually help fellow students? So these are questions. At the workplace, I'll probably be asking the Minister of Manpower, what are we doing with workplace safety and health? What does health mean? Is it just physical health? Are we going to talk about mental health? How do we help SMEs? How do we help HR professionals understand the area of mental wellness as well, so that the workplace there's more inclusivity, right? And slowly move. One thing that I'm still trying to work on is to actually link tangible benefits of mental wellness to economic gains. Because I think if we can link that, then this conversation takes on a larger contextual nature. Right? And being an SME business owner, I could tell you, if we focus on mental health and making sure that every individual colleague of ours are at the optimum mental and emotional well-being, productivity and innovation will increase. Because I think it's common sense. Today we talk a lot about skills upgrading, we talk a lot about innovation, but if my colleague comes and is probably suffering from mild depression, we could send this person for training after training, he's not at his best. All the training, you won't get the full ROI. But if we focus and help this individual to be at the peak mental and emotional well-being, then the downstream training, the downstream innovation would probably be, for him at the individual level and for the company, would achieve a lot more return on investments. So I'm trying now to draw that link to economic output as well. So when we do that, then we can really have a more national level conversation. Because my concern right now is that a lot of the conversation right now is stuck within that social sphere. Right? But if we can link it to economic matters as well, and say that, this is actually the singular issue upstream, that if we tackle all these downstream benefits from a social point of view, from a healthcare point of view, from an economic point of view, there will be large-scale benefits. Then we can take this forward, right, and make it a national priority. So this is my current thinking at the local level and also at the national level. But yeah, I'm actually also have a team of legislative assistants that I've told them that, hey, let's make mental health and wellness a key parliamentary agenda, for at least for myself. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting discussion, and it brought to my attention that there's this thing which is the Australian Research Council. They actually have a priority in mental health and well-being, which I've yet to see at NMRC kind of priorities. I don't see that same one-to-one translation. And being a researcher that looks at how people use music technologies on the go, I actually found out that one of the key stresses is actually commute. It actually adds a lot of stress to people, and how people can actually cope with that stress is through listening to music. And therefore, I'm actually curious to find out how technologies can actually empower people to be more self-reliant become more self-reliant and more self-empowered on managing their mental health. And I would love to hear your take as a technologist and as a musician on what you think about that, how technology can help empower people in terms of managing their mental health and well-being, and likely opportunities in Singapore.
Yeah, I'll give a short answer to that so that we give more opportunities for others. I think technology is a double-edged sword, right? Technology could enable a lot of delivery or actually even enrich lives, but there is also the negative side of technology. Some of the mental health wellness issues could be the negative effects of technology. And I would say, since you're a researcher, I would say it would be good to have a little more research on the negative effects of technology so that when we start adopting technology or using technology, we are very clear of the downside risks and the negative issues so that we can navigate a bit better, right? But in my experience with regards to mental wellness and health, a key part of what is innately about human beings is that we actually want physical interaction. It is quite difficult to have a chat or a WhatsApp chat or technology or like a Zoom to assist someone. When I speak to counselors, obviously during the circuit breaker, it was a very challenging time. They had to do a lot of their counseling sessions over platforms like Zoom, but most would still say that they would still prefer physical interactions. During the circuit breaker, we saw a spike in mental wellness cases because I think people really miss those physical interactions. So while I'm a firm believer of technology, but I don't believe technology should replace physical human interactions. It should enhance it and facilitate it, but it cannot replace human-to-human physical interactions, especially in the case of mental and emotional wellness. Yeah. Thanks, Stefan. Thanks for your questions. Right. And thanks for following me on the campaign and listening to what I say in the campaign. At least one person is listening.
Pleasure. Would love to continue this chat about music and technologies and the potential for health and well-being offline.
Definitely. Yep.
Thanks, Stefan. So we have a relevant question on mental health as well. This is from the chat coming from Hao Jin. He's suggesting whether, capping working hours and giving more leave and rest time to workers, will that help mental wellness and the economy? He also suggested creating a few new public holidays, shortening the work week to 4.5 days for some sectors, and higher minimum leave quotas that will give workers more family time and a chance, spend more time with the family, and whether you would like to push for such relevant related proposals in Parliament.
Thanks, Ida. And thank you, Hao Jin, for your question. I think you do raise some good suggestions. Clearly, if you have a better work-life balance, that would help with mental wellness. But having said that, because of work from home and circuit breaker, the way we work is starting to change. And I could also share that for quite a few who are having stresses, work is sometimes their refuge. Because the stress points might not be at the workplace. It could really much be at home. So I would say I'll probably go a bit more upstream and delve a bit deeper at where are the potential stress points, and then reevaluate whether do we need to make changes at the workplace or do we need to make changes more at schools or at home. I could share as an MP, most of the time when I encountered residents who have potential stresses, the stress points are actually at home, not so much at the workplace. At the workplace, what I would hope to look at is really helping employers in terms of policies and HR capabilities to be able to help colleagues in the area of mental wellness to create a more inclusive workplace. So things like if you have things like this potential discrimination of colleagues who may have some mental illness, policies to make that a bit better. We want to encourage HR professionals to upskill in this particular area so that if they do have colleagues who are looking for assistance, they can provide the first line of assistance. Some companies who are a bit more forward thinking are actually now also providing benefits, healthcare benefits in terms of counseling hours. So where they actually put some of the HR budgets and for their staff to actually have chats with a counselor. So those are areas which I think I prefer to look at than to go too much downstream, because I think we do need time to investigate to analyze what are the potential stresses and how we can help companies deliver better mental wellness policies in their workplace.
Thanks, Edward. So on a lighter note and shifting gears, there's a question from Shamin asking whether you have tried your own duck pizza in Timber and whether food is a big factor for you in starting Timber itself. And perhaps on a related note, since we're talking about F&B, how are you navigating COVID-19?
Thanks. Was it Charmaine who asked the question?
Charmaine, yeah.
Charmaine, thank you. Yes, I've eaten my duck pizza probably one too many times. So thanks for your support. I assume you have eaten our duck pizza as well. Is food a big factor? Certainly it is. But having said that, what's a bigger factor for me is the people who create the food. I'm more interested in the hawkerpreneurs, the chefs, the human story behind the food. I feel that for every dish that we put out, there is a huge human story behind it. And that's, to me, a bigger factor, and a factor which often we are trying to celebrate, to develop, and to propagate. So I could share with you that duck pizza was actually created by one of our ex-head chefs. And interestingly, he's not even Chinese. He was a Muslim chef who created a duck pizza with hoisin sauce. So that's a story by itself. Today, when we run our hawker centers, we're always looking at the hawkerpreneur and not just the food that he creates, but also celebrating his story and his inspiration. Yeah.
Well, the next question is actually from me about COVID-19 and how you are navigating it. And I think we have one relevant question from Zilik. So he asked about during your election campaign, you mentioned about you pledged to be a champion for SMEs, and how can we help improve the image of SMEs as an attractive employers for Singaporeans, especially in the context of recent online debates raised by another SME employer, right? In terms of helping HR and management staff adopt progressive practices which you have been advocating. So these maybe you can group them and answer them.
Sure. Okay, so maybe I'll tackle COVID-19 first. So COVID-19 has indeed been a huge impact for a lot of SMEs. The good news is that the certain sectors have been recovering, although recovery has been very uneven depending on industry sectors. Even for Timber Group, our recovery has been a bit uneven because it depends on two large factors: location of our venues. Because of work from home, venues that tend to be closer to the heartlands or residential areas are recovering faster compared to venues that are in the CBD area. So how we have actually been navigating this was, one, understanding that survival is now the first top priority, but survival does not necessarily mean only the company survive. It also means protecting our people's livelihoods. So I'm pleased to share that up to today, Timber has not laid off anyone, and we have not also instituted any pay cuts. It was important that we looked at survival as also, and when we say it's the Timber family, we have to mean it. We have to say that we have to also protect the livelihoods of our people. So there's always been cash flow preservations, looking for opportunities for secondment. We actually look for other companies where our staff could actually go for secondment. I think a few months ago when we had the dormitory issues, many of our F&B catering companies were short of staff. We managed to second some of our colleagues to help them. So to sustain their jobs, to lower the manpower costs at Timber as well. We sent a lot of our people for training. and then we get some training, absentee payroll allowances, and use that downtime to also upskill our people. So that is how we have been adapting and conserving cash flow and preserving livelihoods at Timber. On the bigger point about SME and what I said during the campaign, I made my maiden speech in Parliament probably 3 weeks ago, and I centered very much on SMEs. And I shared that firstly, we do need to reframe the way we look at companies as not just an economic agent, but also an active agent of social change. On the point about, and I'm assuming you're referencing the SME employer to Mr. Delane Lim about his hiring. Am I right? Is it the viral post that Mr. Delane Lim? The way government supports companies shapes behavior. And we talked about earlier about mental health and mental wellness. First, if we can define and start having a change of mindset that companies are not just economic agents, but also agents of social change, then we need to review the KPIs of how we support companies. Today, as an SME, if I go to someone like Enterprise Singapore and ask for a grant to develop my business, most of the time, the metrics or the KPIs is very productivity focused. We are asked about what's our productivity. We are asked about what's our value added per worker. Today, in the investment world, increasingly, companies are looking at investing in firms that has environmental social governance, the ESG mandate. I think I have urged the government to look at the ESG model in a way we also support SMEs. Often, the way we support companies influences the behavior of companies. And if government can start taking the lead to say that perhaps it's now time to look beyond just productivity and innovation, but also environmental and social governance mandate in the way we provide grants or loans to SMEs, that would start creating a new generation of SMEs. The heartening thing for me is that I think the new generation of consumers are increasingly pushing companies on the social front as well. They not only want to have good products, but they also want to know are the products and services a value add to society? Does it pass the ESG mandate? So those are policies that I'm urging the government to change. With regards to also assisting SMEs, I urge the government to also relook at not just picking up the big winners, but also supporting every SME in their journey. And also decoupling the business and the entrepreneur and placing more premium on the individual. Because I believe that the entrepreneur, we need to walk that journey with the entrepreneur. So in the case of COVID, if they need to repivot, reboot, or even restart, help the entrepreneurs through this journey and not just the big companies as well. But I would say, if you could indulge me, please listening to my speech that I made in Parliament 3 weeks ago. It was my parliamentary debut speech, which I focused firmly on SMEs.
Thanks, Edward. Maybe we take the question from Ka Kiong, who has raised his hands.
So I have a lighter note questions. So from your sharing, we know that you are a very busy person, busy schedule. So last time during your, you are busy with NUS and your business, and now you are busy with your politics and your business. So do you have a productivity routine? And I wanted to know how do you personally maintain your work-life balance? Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Ka Kiong, for the more light-hearted question. I think firstly, you need to enjoy your job. I think you need to find meaning in what you do. So I try to find meaning in what we do. As in my new role as MP, I do really enjoy looking forward to meeting residents and being of assistance and being of help. So that I find that fulfillment in that. In Parliament, I think we spoke about mental health, we spoke about SMEs. There is just so much to do, and I'm just hoping to play my part to move the needle. In terms of productivity, I would say actually very basic. I'm trying my absolute best to have at least 7 hours of sleep, because I realize that if you don't do that, life is a marathon, and actually, if you don't sleep well, you're not going to be very productive the next day as well. So it's very basic. I try to have 7 hours of sleep. Admittedly, my exercise schedule has taken a beating since I became a member of Parliament. I have a lot less time to exercise. Before my life in politics, I actually put into my work schedule agenda item in my work schedule as gym time. And I was not embarrassed to tell my colleagues that this is my work time. And I says, if I'm not fighting fit, how can I actually function well as the managing director of the company? So I work exercise timing as a work matter. So it's an agenda. But of course, as I said, since being an MP, I have a lot less time for that. I'm hoping to resume some of those norms. So really taking care of self-care is actually very important, because if we don't take care of our mental wellness, physical wellness, we can't be productive. And that's what I focus on. With regards to if there's a grid or a schedule, the truth of the matter is that I think I used to have a lot more control of my schedule when I was just at Timber. Today, I have a lot more bosses, and my boss's first chief among all will be my residents. And I'm no longer as control my schedule. So I just basically jump from one meeting to another, one house visits to another, and actually answering a lot of emails. Residents today actually send a lot of emails for requests, Facebook message as well. So I'm still trying to stabilize my schedule, but I would say self-care first, making sure I sleep well, I eat well, so that I am at top of my condition to be able to serve my constituents. I hope I answered your question in a rather long-winded way.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you.
I think that also answers Wei Liang's question about how you split your time between being a businessman and an MP. We have a question coming from Christopher about you mentioned about Timber providing platforms for musicians and hawkers, and how will you try to develop local chefs when the more successful ones in Singapore are non-locals?
Well, depends on what your category of chefs are. I think our local chefs have been doing us proud. We have more and more hawkerpreneurs as well. So are you defining chefs as chefs who are only Michelin stars, or are you looking at hawkerpreneurs? There are many different segments, but by and large, I think we have had a few good ones coming on stream in the last few years. Some of them have also been Michelin star chefs. But I prefer to focus more on hawkerpreneurs, because I think that's a distinct culture of Singapore, and it's a culture that we ought to protect and cherish. And that's the area of focus that Timber has been focusing on, to really incubate and support our hawkerpreneurs.
Yeah, I think Christopher just mentioned the non-hawker chefs, the more atas kind.
The more atas one. Well, as I mentioned, there are Michelin star chefs that are now locals. I think the good thing about having the Michelin guide in Singapore is actually to elevate the visibility of our more atas chefs. The other part which I think we need to help our chefs is probably more of the business fundamentals. Many chefs are great at their culinary art, and they know what to do in terms of cooking. But running an F&B, running a restaurant is a business. It's not just about cooking good food. So one is to increase their capability to understand the business side of running a restaurant, or two, pairing them up with business partners who can take care of the business side of the house, so that our chef can focus on the culinary side of the house. Most of the time when I meet chef owners, they often struggle between the culinary side of the house and actually managing the business. And so if we could do both, I think that's one way to help to elevate our Singaporean culinary artists and chefs. I hope I answered your question, Christopher. So in short, two ways: upskill their business skills. Two, pair them up with business owners who can help them run the business side of the house, so that they can focus on the culinary side of the house.
Thanks, Edward. So moving on, we have a question from Mervyn. It's a follow-up one from what you mentioned about mental health. He asked whether you consider looking into educators' mental health as well, because teachers and MOE HQ staff are increasingly having more stresses, especially during the pandemic.
Certainly. In fact, anecdote is that sometimes I do give talks or sharing sessions with educators. A few times, educators actually come for a learning journey at our venues, especially at Timber Plaza. And I often joke with them. I say, "You guys are not the ones that I want to speak to. I would like to speak to the parents." And I feel really that teachers today are facing multiple pressure points from students, MOE, parents. So mental well-being of our teachers are extremely important. I think I mentioned just now about asking about number of school counselors we have in schools. It should not just be for our students, but it should also be for our educators. So that if our educators need some help, there is someone to go to even in school. Yeah. So certainly it's something that I think it should be on a key priority.
One more question from Charlotte. What is the one most important thing you have experienced from your time as an entrepreneur that you want to prioritize to change now as a member of parliament?
Very good question. Let me. What is the most important thing you have experienced from your time as an entrepreneur? I think it's about spending time. The biggest issue is that time is actually the greatest commodity. And in my time as an entrepreneur, I've learned that, firstly, as I mentioned just now, it's a team effort. And we do need to spend time with every individual person in the team. What the challenge right now as a member of parliament is that I now have a lot more residents and constituents compared to stakeholders at Timber. How can I still give individual attention and time to residents? That is something which I want to prioritize. It's not just about issues that I believe in, that I need to ensure that it's also issues that our residents believe in, and we work together as a community. The good thing is we can leverage on technology for things like Zoom to have more conversations with residents. But I could tell you, even for house visits, I do house visits every week, at least twice. But the amount of face time I have with each resident is probably a maximum 5 to 8 minutes. But what I'm trying to do and prioritize is now that how can I lengthen that conversations to have more touch points so that residents feel that they have a personal direct line to me and they could share with me their personal dreams and aspirations, and we can work together as a community. So I could share that one thing that I do personally at the house visit is that when I meet residents at house visits, I do give my mobile number. So I take time to actually exchange my mobile number to my residents, and I assure them that this is my direct line. It's not an administrator or a volunteer that looks at the messages. When you message me, I read it and I'll reply to you. So that as I go through the house visits, I don't need to come around one more time to have a conversation with you at your house. We can have a conversations moving forward because you now have my direct line. So that is what I've learned as an entrepreneur, that we must always have personal time with our team members and work together. Now, as a member of parliament, it's more challenging because we have a lot more people, but we can use technology. I prefer WhatsApp because things like Zoom is great, but right now we have 83 people and not everyone will be able to have a conversation together. But once we establish a WhatsApp line, it becomes more personal. So in about 2 months, I've already collected close to 400 numbers from residents, and we now have a direct communication line. Yeah. So I hope I answered your question, Charlotte.
I think Charlotte was more referring to, from your own experience as a businessman, what are the issues and causes you want to champion in Parliament from your own reflections and your own experience?
I think it goes back to two main areas. SMEs. I think I'm one of the very few parliamentarians that are SME business owners. As a business owner, and the SME community are facing real challenges right now, and I feel that I do need to reflect some of those challenges and constraints in Parliament, and to help address some policies that will help support our SMEs a lot more. And I mentioned mental health. That's something which I firmly believe in and intend to pursue. Have there been anything I've learned or surprised by? I guess what's being surprised is that there is no tutorial to be an MP. No one teaches you how to be an MP. You very much trust into the role. As soon as you're elected, you're expected to perform as the MP. So I recall the next morning after the polling results, and this year I think the polling results was a bit later because we extended the voting time. I was back in the constituency doing house visits. So there is no lecture, there is no Skills Future series on how to be MP. You very much are thrown into the deep end of the pool and very much go head on and start serving residents on the very first day. So, yeah.
We have one question from Te An about how can Singapore industry come together, to harness a pack to procure from overseas, to reach out to the overseas the regional markets, rather than looking to government for support and direction?
Very good question, and I think hunting as a pack is something which other countries, specifically like the Japanese are very good at hunting as a pack. They are extremely united when they go abroad. I would say two things, and I will also say the second part is also an opportunity. One, actually COVID-19 has created a much better camaraderie and unity among business owners. There are quite a few organic groups that sprung out during COVID-19 because SMEs were all facing challenges. So there is a Facebook group that says SG United for Tenancy Fairness. Even the hawkers came out with a Facebook page about Hawkers United. And I know there's also a WhatsApp group that's about Safe F&B. And these are all members who are owners. So that's a good start that actually COVID-19 has encouraged business owners to see ourselves beyond as competitors, but also collaborators. So beyond the informal groups, there are also trade associations. I serve on the Restaurant Association of Singapore, and I could tell you COVID-19 has made us work closer together and having more frequent meetings together. And there's now a lot more dialogues on how we can hunt together as a tech. The second opportunity is if we look at and this is one of the things I mentioned also in my parliamentary debut speech to urge the government to look beyond verticals. Don't look at trade industries as manufacturing, food, or retail, or technology, or manufacturing, or microelectronics. Look at opportunities where we could create networking opportunities and partnership opportunities where companies in different verticals actually collaborate. So that is where innovation happens. I believe innovation happens when we partner cross industries to leverage on each other's experience and skill sets and have more joint venture. So a good example would be for timber I could share is our RFID tray return system. We had no idea what is RFID. We had no expertise in RFID technology. But thankfully, we were introduced to a local SMEs who specialize in RFID technology for the past 20 years. And we told them we have this idea about putting an RFID chip on a tray and then creating a deposit and refund system. They said it was possible, and we collaborated, and we created a RFID tray return system that is patented today. So there are benefits and opportunities in not just hunting as a pack, but also creating cross-collaboration opportunities among industry verticals to push the innovation sphere. And then creating opportunities where companies can co-own these intellectual properties so that we could continue to grow together. So that is something which I've also called urging the government to do more.
So we have one question from Kenneth. Let's see. What would you like to see in Singapore's SMEs in 2030?
I would like to see more SMEs being credited not just for their economic contribution, but also their social contribution, and more SMEs. And I just want to make a point, and I also made this in Parliament. There is a big difference, in my opinion, on impact companies versus companies that pursue a CSR agenda. I think today the woke generation doesn't really believe in CSR anymore. The products and services that a company creates has by itself be a value add to society. So I hope there will be more impact-driven SMEs, and we can encourage more of them, and we can recognize more of them.
Thanks, Edward. So maybe are there any more questions from the audience? Because we have probably time for just a couple more minutes for one or two more last questions. If there are none, then I shall ask the last question. So given that you're newly minted MP, what sort of KPIs will you set for yourself, that you want to review at the end of the next 5 years?
Well, as an MP, I think my first priority will be my constituents, right, my residents. And I think the upcoming challenge that we are all really preparing for ourselves right now and making sure that we have the resources to support and walk this journey with our residents is that actually the economy is going to be weakening further. We expect retrenchments to go up. And as an MP, I would like to be more proactive than reactive, to create programs to say that, okay, you may lose your jobs, but we have prepared all these programs of assistance. I looked at it from a 360-degree approach. probably mainly three parts. Usually, we tend to look at things in very linear format. You lose a job, then how you find a job. But I think it's not as simple. It's actually a lot more complicated. Often there is a time lag between losing a job and finding a job. We do need to have community financial assistance in the interim because some residents are living hand to mouth and they have families to sustain. So one key area is to actually increase our financial assistance support within the community to provide interim assistance. Second, we have to work really hard in holding more recruitment talks to match employers to job seekers at the community level as well. So one thing I could share that at my regular Meet the People session on Monday evenings, we used to get residents coming to us and say, hey, I need to look for a job. Most of the time we have to write a letter to WSG, to E2I, says that could you help assign a job coach for our residents? We reviewed it and it says, wow, that might take another 1 week. By the time we write the letter, send the letter out, the agency contact the residents, it could be 1 week, 2 weeks after. And imagine the anxiety of the residents who don't have a job and have to sustain their families. So now we actually have a permanent jobs portal, touchscreen at the branch. On the spot, I'll tell the residents, sure, I'll help you now. I literally walk them to the terminal, help them at the terminal, and the terminal guides them through a process where they actually fill up their information, their work experience, generates a basic CV, helps them look for a job within vicinity of their address because most residents want to work closer to home. And if they find a job that they like, on the spot at the MPS session, we send out job applications to the companies. So to me, if you ask me, Ita, about KPI, I think it's about being more timely in our delivery and service with our residents. And they need to feel that we are walking the journey with them. And not just sending them to one agency to another agency. We are the one-stop shop solution, and we must walk this journey with our residents. And the upcoming challenge will really be about jobs. And another part to that goes back to mental wellness and mental health. When someone loses a job, it is stressful. There will be certain anxiety. When we pick that up, we then work with our social welfare organization in the community at Taiwan, Kwang, Feiyu, and New Life, and to assign I won't call it a counselor because sometimes residents don't like that, but I would say befrienders. And that's the other reason why I want to beef up our community grassroots leaders' skill sets in terms of mental first aid. So that once we have a larger pool of befrienders, I could then activate befrienders to actually walk this journey with our residents who have potential stresses due to unemployment or maybe other reasons as well. Right. So I hope I give you a bit of a flavor of what my immediate priorities are and where I'm gravitating towards.
Thanks, Edward. So I think we're running out of time. Thank you so much for really.
I saw something from Imelda. She said that I guess there is no time to answer all those questions. Can we do maybe a WhatsApp?
Yep.
I'm happy to look at that. So maybe we could work together with the alumni office and see how we could facilitate that.
Yeah, maybe together with OAR and NUSS, we can see how we can pull together a group. I'm sure there are many talents with a lot of networks and opportunities that we can pull together to make change happen.
Yeah. Can I just make a personal pitch?
Sure.
I am always looking out for volunteers. One of the few things I always go to my house visit is I'm always very happy when residents say, hey, I'd like to volunteer at your RCs, I'd like to volunteer with you at the branch. And actually, for my parliamentary work, I'm also looking for volunteers or legislative assistants. I take the position as not a single person has a monopoly of all knowledge, and it's good to work with a team so that we could cover as many areas as possible. And at times, it might not just be issues that I want to push. It could also be issues that residents wants to push or volunteers wants to push, and I'm happy to be that conduit to raise these issues as well. So if anyone is keen to work together with me either on the entrepreneurial front or on the social front, please feel free to ping me. I have a Facebook page, so you could join me there as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Edward, for extending these opportunities for our audience. Really grateful for your time in sharing and recounting your journey, setting up Timber, and moving on from entrepreneurship to public service. I think you are really a Superman who can juggle many hats, and certainly I think 24 hours is really not enough for you. So with that, I think thank you everyone. Thank you to the audience for taking your lunchtime, spending your lunchtime with us. Wish everyone had a good lunch, and I'll hand the time back over to the MC.
Thank you,
Thank you
Mr.
very much,
Chia,
everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing your insights and experiences, and thank you, Mr. So, for moderating this session. And thank you, everybody, for supporting today's online session of Lunch Dialogues organized by the NUS Alumni Relations Office and the National University of Singapore Society. So stay tuned to the Alumnet website for updates on other upcoming events. Take care, keep well, and stay healthy.